Mr. Speaker, sir, before responding to the movers of the gracious speech, I firstly pay tribute to our colleagues Jamie Cann and Sir Ray Powell, who have died during the last session. Jamie Cann served Ipswich for nearly 10 years as its Member of Parliament, and for many years prior to that as a member and later leader of Ipswich Borough Council. His sudden death was a sad loss to us all. Jamie had strong views, as we all know, often forcibly expressed, but he was immensely well respected. His funeral service was full to overflowing, and it was very clear to all the affection the people of Ipswich had for him, and I know that the whole House will mourn his loss. And Sir Ray Powell's death was a great shock after 22 years' service as a Member of Parliament. Ray was known throughout the House as Whip and latterly Chairman of the committee which oversaw the construction of Portcullis House. It was said of Ray, I think accurately, indeed I know accurately, that he could predict the result of any vote, and I mean any vote in this place. It did help, of course, that he was the Whip in charge of accommodation. But he was a true voice of the valleys, and all of us are the poorer for his loss. And the House extends its condolences to the families of both Ray and Jamie. To the proposer and seconder, I mean, I've heard many speeches proposing and seconding the Queen's speech in this House. I'm sitting on both sides, and I have to say that I think the two speeches we heard today were amongst the best that I've ever heard in this House. I give my warmest congratulations to my right honourable friend, the member for Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley. Well, I was reflecting on that. It's very, very kind of him to have called his grandson Blair. I can't promise that when and if I have one, I will call mine Fawkes, however. It would be... We'll reflect on it. We can always set up a review. It was an immensely humorous and generous speech. It was also, actually, it was the hallmark of him, if I may say this about him, that when he spoke about his time as a minister, and he did an immense amount, he was very kind about my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, but he performed an enormous service in this area himself and did a lot of tremendous work. But I think that what came through his speech is what always comes through with him, which is his general optimism and hope about the future. And it was an excellent speech, and I do commend him for it. The statistic that impresses me most about him is that when he was first elected in 1979, apparently his majority was just 1,500. But last year it was 15,000. And by the way, there were then 22 Conservative MPs in Scotland, now there's only one. So his contribution has taken many forms. But he has done his constituency proud today, and we thank him for it. The Loyal Address was, of course, as we know, seconded by my honourable friend, the member for Bethnal Green and Bow. I would echo entirely the words that the right honourable gentleman used about her predecessor, Peter Shaw, who I knew for many years as well, and who was someone who, even if I didn't always agree with, on some issues I strongly disagreed with them, was someone of genuine integrity and someone of immense commanded immense respect by all people, whether he was political opponents or political friends. And I thought, again, her speech was marvellous. What she said about housing in her constituency, what she said about the work that she did in relation to genocide is absolutely right. We wish she'd identified the Conservative whip, but she didn't. But I hope that she will identify him, at least to the right honourable gentleman. I think it could come in immensely useful there. But I also want to pick out one particular thing that she said, and that was about the education results in her constituency in Borough. They have improved quite dramatically, some 7% additional increase, I think, in GCSEs, I'm right in saying, in her borough. And that is a tremendous tribute, obviously, to the teachers and the pupils and the parents and the schools in her constituency. She made a marvellous speech, a witty speech, and a speech with serious points in it too. She came into the House as one of the youngest members of Parliament, and it's clear that she has a long and successful political career ahead of her. Although how successful and when successful, I cannot say. Mr. Speaker, I hope the House will forgive me if, before coming to respond to the right honourable gentleman's speech directly, I do say something about the firefighters' dispute. He mentioned that himself. And I think it may be appropriate just to say some words about it now. I mean, let me say right at the outset that I am sorry the leadership of the Fire Brigades Union have chosen confrontation. They've been offered 11% over 2 years. That is more than nurses, it's more than teachers, it's more than police officers, it's much more. All that is asked in return is modernisation of plainly outdated practices. The offer came out of the independent review by George Bain, the man who headed the commission introducing the minimum wage, and who sat with two others, one from local government, the other last year's president of the Trade Union Congress, himself a trade union leader. The idea that such a review, therefore, was biased in some way is palpably absurd. It was an entirely persuasive and reasonable report that I commend people to read. We, all of us in this House, I hope, pay tribute to the hard and sometimes dangerous work that firefighters do. But no government, with inflation at around 2%, could yield to a wage claim of 40% with the insistence that any claim is unlinked to any change in working practices at all. It is not just this government that could not contemplate such a thing. There is no government on earth that could yield to such a claim. If we did so, if we said yes to 40% for firefighters, how could we, or any government, say no to a 40% claim for teachers, or nurses, or police officers? And if we said yes to all, the consequence is so clear that it hardly bears spelling out. After all the hard work to get low inflation, low unemployment, low mortgage rates, the lowest in each case for decades, after all that hard work to stabilise the economy, we would simply wreck it and take this country back to days that I believe we all hope have gone forever. No government, certainly not this government, wants a confrontation, especially not at this time. The suggestion that amidst the current security issues particularly, that this government has tried to engineer this strike is offensive and it is wrong. Absolutely. We have, on the contrary, tried our utmost to be as reasonable and as generous as possible within the limits of what is possible. Even now, I hope after this 48-hour stoppage, common sense will prevail. We have been in discussion with the union about emergency cover in the event of a major incident, which is obviously important. Meanwhile, we will continue to make all preparations to minimise risk to the public insofar as we can do so, guided by the best professional advice of our armed forces. And with the permission of you, Mr. Speaker, I know that my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, would like to make a statement on this tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, if I may turn to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, I would like to welcome him to his first Queen's Speech debate as Leader of the Opposition. No. It's been a busy few days for the right honourable gentleman, and we're here to help. And we know that he's on Desert Island Discs next week. So I thought that we collectively could help with one or two choices of music. Now, everyone chooses a Beatles song, for example. So, my honourable friends unkindly are saying help. I don't know whether any of his honourable friends have got any messages in that regard. Maybe you say hello, we say goodbye. Or to celebrate his political roots, what about I Can't Let Maggie Go? To mark his contribution to the last Conservative government, he could perhaps choose the Rebel Rebel. And to commemorate his year as Conservative leader, I think the sound of silence has the right ring to it. But the other thing about Desert Island Discs, which is where I think we can really help, is that he gets to choose a book. And I've got the perfect volume for him. It's a work published by the Common Courage Press. Its title is indeed Unite or Die, and its author is one Fidel Castro. He's absolutely right. That's the very point I was going to make. He's shouting out, he's still there, and he is, yes. 42 years is what honourable members have got to look forward to with the right honourable gentleman. I have to say, his party, not that I've always studied the Conservative Party website with such assiduousness, but I have studied it for today, and it shows the right honourable gentleman, at any rate, is carrying on unabashed. It says, and I quote from the Conservative Party website, "The self-styled quiet man of politics is following up his party's successful Bournemouth conference with a pledge to meet and listen to people. Mr. Duncan Smith said he was prepared to return again and again to impoverished localities. He said, and I quote, I can't just revisit once and expect people to turn round and say, thank God you're back." But I have some good news for him. There's a News of the World opinion poll on Conservative leaders that was published a few days ago. The bad news is that he is behind the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Rushcliffe. But the good news is that he is 3 points ahead of Basil Brush. So there is hope for him yet. But, Mr. Speaker, the truth about the position of the Conservative Party is that their problem is not disunity. Their problem is what they unite around. It is policy that is the problem, because he stood up at that dispatch box and effectively repeated the Conservative position to oppose investment in the National Health Service and oppose it in schools. Oh, yes. He got up and he attacked the increases that we are bringing in April, and that is because he does not agree with putting the extra investment into the health service. And yesterday, the Conservative Party made it clear not merely are they opposed to the extra spending on schools, on hospitals, on the police, all the extra money we're putting in, they also said that they were going to scrap the Sure Start programme. Now, that is a programme that has brought hope to people in communities up and down this country.
Peter Tapsell, a point of order.
Do you recall, Mr. Speaker, ruling in the last session that the Prime Minister should address his remarks to the subject under debate and not discussing the Conservative policy?
Order. That's only at Prime Minister's question time.
Look, I sympathise with him. I know he doesn't want us to talk about the Conservative Party, but it is important to state the difference between the two parties on this Queen's Speech debate. The truth is he's opposed to the investment. He's opposed the Nice Treaty on enlargement in Europe, alone of any Conservative leader in Europe. He's opposed the single currency on any terms at any time. They put a 3-line whip opposing adoption by unmarried couples. Where they should be moderate, they are extreme, but where they should be tough, they're soft. They're going to oppose, apparently, the government's new law and order proposals. They have opposed many of the proposals on the seizure of assets of drug dealers. They're opposing the tightening of rules on evidence, on previous convictions, on cracking down on abuse in Crown Court trials. They've even opposed the fixed penalty notices for antisocial behaviour. Where people need investment in public services, the Conservatives are opposed to it. Where business needs a sensible attitude in Europe, they leave Britain marginalised. Where people want us to get tough on antisocial behaviour, they tell us it doesn't matter. And that, with respect, is their problem. Out of touch and backward, not so much nasty or nice, just plain, simply irrelevant. This Queen's Speech, Mr. Speaker, focuses on economic stability, on the invest and reform programme in public services, on strong civic society based on rights and responsibilities, and on Britain engaged in the world. Now, he mentioned the previous bills on crime. Let me first of all point out that crime under this government is down. Under the Conservatives, it doubled. Oh yes, and if people look, for example, today at the latest figures issued by the Metropolitan Police in the last year in London, they have managed to cut the street crime, not have the street crime go up, as he indicated a moment or two ago. And the previous bills were important. They were bills, for example, to introduce the crime and disorder partnerships in 1998, supported by the police and supported by local people. They were measures, for example, to do with licensing the private security industry. They were measures to do with terrorism, and in particular post-Omar terrorist legislation, and again post-September the 11th. Now, this criminal justice bill sets out to rebalance the system in favour of the victim. It arises out of the old review of 2 years ago in this year's White Paper. The criminal justice bill will set out a strategy to modernise the entire criminal justice system from end to end, from better detection to effective sentencing, right through to the rehabilitation of offenders. It will make fundamental changes to pre-trial processes, including reforms to police and criminal evidence, bail, charging and disclosure. It will change criminal trial processes by making changes to rules of evidence, double jeopardy, juries and appeals. It will put sense into sentencing through comprehensive reform of the sentencing framework, and it will introduce provisions to address drug-related and juvenile offending. And it will improve the treatment of victims and witnesses. I would have hoped such a bill would be supported by the Conservative Party, because it will be supported by people in this country. And it will be backed by the Courts Bill, at long last unifying court administration and modernising court practice. And the other is antisocial behaviour. And, Mr. Speaker, certainly.
The Prime Minister will appreciate that all around the House and in the country, many people will support effective measures to deal with crime and antisocial behaviour, and that can't be a matter of disagreement. But on the question of sentencing policy, which the government want quite rightly to bring forward proposals so that it follows the time in custody by supervision after custody, can the Prime Minister tell us whether this good idea has now received the support of his friend the Chancellor, so that when we pass the bill, the money will be available in this Parliament to make sure it's implemented now, not promised now, but not delivered until very much later?
We have indeed the money set aside to implement the provision. That is the purpose of the settlement that was given to the Home Office in the spending review. But I hope when he says that most people will support the measures on antisocial behaviour in this House, I don't know whether he speaks for the Liberal Democrats or not, but I hope they do support it, because it is essential. After all, in communities up and down this country, we are putting a huge investment. The New Deal for the unemployed, the New Deal for the communities themselves, the Working Families Tax Credit, Sure Start, record rises in child benefit. I think on the basis of the opportunities we are giving, we are entitled to demand responsibility in return and to say that those things that make people's lives a misery in the communities, the graffiti, the vandalism, the aggressive behaviour, the fly tipping, abandoned cars, antisocial tenants, truancy, irresponsible use of air guns, all these things should be dealt with comprehensively and a simple system of penalties put in place. And I say to honourable members opposite who say, well, the antisocial... Surely.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and certainly I and my constituents will very much welcome the lists of measures in the Queen's speech on antisocial behaviour. But they are also concerned about another aspect of crime and antisocial behaviour, which is domestic violence. I didn't hear anything on that in the Queen's speech, and I do hope that's not slipping off the government's agenda.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, because no, it isn't. There will be a consultation paper published on domestic violence within the next few months, and he's entirely right in saying this is a huge problem. We know it affects many thousands of people in this country to their great misery. Now, as I said, surely.
I appreciate the commitment to antisocial behaviour. Can we have an undertaking from the Prime Minister that the laws to deal with it will be extended to Northern Ireland, where people there want it as well, particularly when they're faced with the so-called joyriding and car thieving, which has led to so many deaths? At the same time, would it be easier to do that within the new legislation rather than trifling again with the reforms of the police, which was never in the Belfast Agreement?
Well, on the antisocial behaviour side, I think we are looking at how we make sure these provisions are available in Northern Ireland too. I think they will be very important for his constituents. And the point about some of the measures introduced so far, it is simply incorrect to say that antisocial behaviour orders haven't worked, but it is true to say that they are too cumbersome in the procedures necessary to get them. That's precisely the reason for streamlining it. It's also the reason for introducing the fixed penalty notices that we want now to increase, so that we put them over a wider range of offences and give more people the power to implement them. And what that does critically, if one talks to any police officer dealing with antisocial behaviour, the problem is the length of time it takes to go through the court procedures. The fixed penalty notice gives them a simple thing to do, and it's then up to the person who is the defendant, effectively, to come to court and have it set aside. Now, sure.
Can I welcome what my honourable friend said in relation to air weapons? There will be thousands of people up and down the country who are either themselves or members of their families have been victims of air weapons. But can he give an indication of when this legislation will be coming forward? Will it be a priority within the timetable?
It certainly will be a priority. We'll bring it forward as soon as we possibly can. Now, Mr. Speaker, as well as measures to change the criminal justice system and the court system and to deal with antisocial behaviour, we will, of course, carry on with the programme of Invest in and Reform. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman says, effectively, that all the changes and all the money that's been put into the health service and education has not worked, that nothing's happened, that nothing's changed. This is, of course, because this is what the Conservatives have to say. They have to say that the National Health Service has failed because they don't want the National Health Service to succeed. They have to say that our school system can't get better because they don't believe that improving our school system is a priority for the government. Now, just take any constituency and let's have a look at what changes have occurred. Even the Right Honourable Gentleman's constituency, if I might. For example, his primary care trust this year has had an 8.9% increase in cash terms. He says it's been wasted, but let me tell him what it's bought. A 25% reduction in inpatient waiting lists from March 97, a reduction of total outpatient waiters of almost 50%, 100% reduction and achievement of maximum waiting time of 26 weeks for the first outpatient appointment, over £1 million to modernise their accident and emergency. On education, it's an increase of almost 20% in funding per pupil. His primary school results, his GCSE results, his A-level results are the best that his constituency has ever had. Now, that is why the money is important for our public services. That is why it would be so wrong to take that money out. And that is in addition, of course.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way. The Prime Minister will recognise that we in Northern Ireland have the highest standard of academic results in secondary schools of any part of the United Kingdom. Will the Prime Minister give the House a commitment that he will not follow up the decision by the Minister of Education, Martin McGuinness, in abolishing selection procedure and destroying our grammar school system in Northern Ireland?
Mr. Speaker, I think I'm sure my right honourable friend who's got responsibilities will have heard the submission that he's made. I'm aware it's a very controversial issue within Northern Ireland. Perhaps I'll let him get back to him with the detail of it. In relation to health and education, however, let us just be clear that the money, of course there's still an immense amount of progress still to be made, but the money has made an immense difference to constituencies up and down this country. Go into any school and see the capital investment there. Look at the extra numbers of nurses, tens of thousands extra. Look at the extra number of teachers. He went on about teacher vacancies. Actually, he was wrong in what he said, but there are 20,000 more teachers today than there were 5 years ago, and there are 80,000 more classroom assistants. Now, does that solve the problem? No. But it does mean it's better than a situation where funding per pupil was getting cut in our schools, where we had 400,000 increases in the numbers on the waiting lists in the National Health Service. As a result of what we are trying to do now, we have the chance for the first time in a generation to get the changes and reforms through in our public services that we need, backed up by substantial extra investment. And whatever the problems in the Conservative Party, their real problem is that when it came to the test of whether they were really going to change, whether it came to the test of whether they were prepared to back the investment in our public services, they voted against that investment.
Grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. Every day, the company pension rights of British workers are getting worse. All we're promised by the government is another Green Paper and more delay. Does the Prime Minister think there will be any decent pension schemes left by the time he legislates?
First of all, it simply is not correct to say that we've done nothing in relation to pensions and pensioners at all. In relation to pensioners themselves, of course, there's been a massive amount of money put into helping pensioners, the poorest pensioners, and we have the upcoming pension credit. In relation to the rest of it, there's the state second pension, the stakeholders' pension, and the purpose of the Green Paper is to try and simplify this. But I have to say to him, it is going to be extremely important, obviously, that we take the long-term decisions necessary in relation to pensions. But we are only going to be able to do that on the basis of what actually works, which is why we set up the two reviews under Mr. Sandler and Mr. Pickering, and we will implement the recommendations that they have made. Yes.
The commitment in the Queen's speech to high levels of employment, does that extend to the fishing communities round our coastline? The Prime Minister would know from his own recent experience, if the French fishing industry was facing mortal threat, then President Chirac would be personally involved in defending it. What personal initiative can the Prime Minister offer to our fishing communities in their time of need?
Well, let me just point out to the honourable gentleman that, as a matter of fact, unemployment in this country is far lower than in France. And that is the best protection we can give to people to create jobs in the economy. And it is, if I may say this to him, it is a cruel deception to people in the fishing industry to pretend that there's some easy solution to the problems that they face. What we have said we will do is we will sit down with the industry in the light of the decisions of the European Council. We will sit down with them and try and work out, if we do have to decommission ships and people are laid off, how we make sure that those people are properly looked after and given protection. And we will do everything we can to do that. But to try and say to them that there is some easy solution that is going to prevent any job losses in the fishing industry is not to be honest with those in the fishing industry. Now, Mr. Speaker, I was saying, of course, it's more than simply that the Conservative... Yeah, sure.
I'm most grateful to him. He said that he was very concerned, Mr. Speaker, about hospital waiting lists. But is he aware that 40 beds are blocked at any given time in the Royal Bournemouth Hospital as a direct result of the cuts of £3 million a year that he's made to the social services budget, which means that there aren't the places in nursing homes. How does he reconcile that with his ambition to reduce waiting lists?
I think it's a very good point he's making, and I'll answer it. The fact is, the reason why we have the bill, which his party incidentally is opposing, is precisely to make sure that we deal with the issue of delayed discharges and bed blocking. So I hope he would support it. And I don't know the exact position of his own constituency, of course, but if what he is saying is that actually they need more money than the money that we provided, and I'm sure they provided a real increase, then how on earth can he support the position of his front bench, which is to oppose even the money we have put in to the National Health Service? And what is more, the Conservatives, of course, are now not only opposed to the money, they're also opposed to the reform as well. They're effectively saying they want to scrap all targets. They attack targets the whole time. I make no apology for saying that if we're putting extra money into the National Health Service, we want to see reductions in waiting lists and waiting times, because that's important for people who use the service. And of course, the reason why they have to oppose the reform is that their reform, insofar as there is one, is not in fact about improving the health service or state schools. What they want to do, and it came across very clearly in what he said in an intervention to one of my honourable friends, what they want to do is to provide a subsidy for people to go outside of the National Health Service. Now, well, he says they are going out. What he's going to do, fine, we have an admission that that is his policy. Let me spell out for his honourable members what the consequence of that policy will be. It will mean that we have to take £1.5 billion out of the current National Health Service budget, and that money will go to a tiny percentage of the overall National Health Service clientele. And let me ask him this. How would a pensioner, for example, who doesn't have a lot of income, how would they afford to pay the money in order to get the subsidy? Or when he talks about giving people a subsidy to go out of the state education system, how is taking that money by way of subsidy out of the state education system going to improve the quality of education for the millions of children that depend on state education in this country? That is why the choices could not be more stark. The choices on crime, where the Conservative Party have now got themselves into the position where they're opposing the measures that we're taking on crime and antisocial behaviour. It could not be more stark on the investment programme, where we want the investment to go in and they want to take it out. And it could not be more stark on the issue of reform, when we are trying to reform these public services as public services, and they're trying to make sure that these public services stop being for the public at all. Surely.
Introduction of National Health Service dentistry into Market Harborough.
And Mr. Speaker, I mean, again, he's absolutely right. It is a problem, which is why we have created a system in which people can get to an NHS dentist. Well, if he can give me the chapter and verse on the cases, I will have them looked into. But let me tell you, when we came to power, of course, as a result of what the previous government had done, they wrecked NHS dentistry in this country. The idea that the Conservative Party, with their record on the National Health Service and dentists, can turn round and tell us that somehow we are the ones that are responsible for that situation, we are the ones trying to put it right by investment and reform, and they're opposing it. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not merely a question of having opposed the investment, opposed the reform, opposing the criminal justice and antisocial behaviour measures. They also have no coherent policy for the economy whatever. We have delivered in this country low inflation, low interest rates, low unemployment. We are making now a major investment in science and technology. The Communications Bill and the Queen's Speech will free up the market in communications. The Planning Bill will simplify procedures. But all of these things would be put at risk if we return to the disastrous policies that under the last Conservative government gave us interest rates of 15%, interest rates of 10% for years or more, 3 million unemployed. Well, they say they've heard it all before, and I can tell them they're going to hear it all again from now until election day. On the issue, Mr. Speaker, of foreign policy, the right honourable gentleman, of course, we agree on the need to go through the United Nations and disarm Iraq of weapons of mass destruction. But I also have to say to them that I hope, as one part of any changes he's looking at in the Conservative Party, he will change their disastrous policy towards the European Union. There is no way that this country can be a leading player in the European Union unless it has a constructive and engaged policy. And it means, of course, that we have to stick up for British interests. But British interests are about being inside of the European Union, not being on the outside. Mr. Speaker, at every level in this Queen's speech, whether it's on the economy or it's in relation to Europe, surely.
Before he leaves foreign policy, no one doubts the Prime Minister's genuine concern with the continent of Africa. But would he reflect as to whether there is not something rather grotesque about the situation in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa, in southern Africa under starvation, and yet the West, ourselves and the Americans, are proposing to launch an attack which will end up heaven knows how in the Middle East? Wouldn't it be wise at least to reflect on the consequences of the two rather different approaches, because there are many people in the world who don't think that the West is being very wise about this?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I mean, he put his question in a very reasonable way, and I pay tribute to the sincerity of his views, because he disagrees very profoundly with what we're doing in relation to Iraq. But I would say to him that the simple answer is that we should do both. We should do both things. We should be ensuring that through the United Nations, Iraq is disarmed of weapons of mass destruction, but we should also be carrying on the policies that this government has pioneered on aid and development, on third world debt, to help people in Africa. And the reason why it is so important to get action in Africa, the reason why we have been leading on the issue of the Partnership for Africa, is precisely so that we can get the combination of measures against conflict, measures for better aid and development, so that the issues in Ethiopia and southern Africa do not occur. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, on each of these major issues, there is a fundamental difference between the two political parties. Fundamental on the issue of the economy, fundamental on the issue of Europe, fundamental on the issue of investment of public services, fundamental on the issue to do with reform of public services, and fundamental in relation to crime and law and order and antisocial behaviour. Well, I'm glad he can count. But it's important to realise that the reason why he has taken his party to the position they're in is because on each of those choices he's made the wrong one. And that is the real reason why, with respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman, he's got the problem that he has. Because this country knows that we need the stable economy and low unemployment, not a return to boom and bust. They know that we need investment in our public services rather than cuts. They know we need reform of our public services, not the privatisation of them. They know that we need the tough measures on crime and antisocial behaviour, and they know that this country's future, in the end, whatever difficulties and doubts they have about Europe, lies at the heart of Europe and not on the outside of Europe. And it is for this reason that this Queen's speech continues that programme of the government, continues the programme on the economy, on our public services, on a strong civic society, on a foreign policy that allows us to play our part in Europe properly. And it is for these reasons also that the party opposite, as it's shown once again today, have made the wrong decisions for the country, and as a result of that will remain out of office for a very long time.